curious, it's not atypical for a series to wane as it progresses. Not always, but that can happen. I mean, it exhausts itself, or people get tempted by the success of the series to warp it in one,
Or even the similarity of the previous 3 seasons. As an artist, we have to break out. We have to do something different. We have to go left now instead of right.
Or you can get stuck repeating what you already did. So how are you feeling about the new season that's forthcoming?
Well, everyone who's seen it so far, this is season 5, we're currently finishing it, and those who've seen it and read the scripts and the actors who, while we were filming it, were all saying, oh, this is our best season yet.
That's good.
And it's and you might think, well, they're just biased. There's recency bias. No, they say
no. They could get exhausted
because they go into each season when they get the scripts, the actors and the crew going, oh, please be good,
right,
and expecting it to do what you just said, which is to start to wane.
Yeah,
and I would argue that we've gotten better as storytellers and as filmmakers. Now, to be fair, we're blessed by the story season 5 is Holy Week. It's the most impactful and important week in the history of humanity.
Right. And there's a big mouthful to chew.
And you see Jesus show sides of himself he's never shown, which is turning over the tables of the temple and yelling and then willingly giving himself up. And you see the betrayer emerge. Judas breaks bad during Holy Week, right? And a million people both
conspiring with Caiaphas.
Yes, where we are now. And of course, in Holy Week is. In history, it was over 1 million people all gathered in one city, most of as many friends of Jesus as enemies, believers and people who wanted him killed, and they're all now in one powder keg.
Right.
So that makes
a hot time in the old town tonight.
So I can't take too much credit for the unique excitement of season 5. It's not necessarily that I'm a better storyteller, although I think I am, but it's also that the text is giving me so much to work with. But I think another thing that sometimes causes shows to wane is what you said earlier, which is they get enraptured by the success. Mm-hmm. And so I always am brought back to that moment back at 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I surrendered and recognized my own humanity and my own sinfulness and my own narcissism and my own need for surrender and my giving of and God strike my soul if I go back to who I was the day before.
Right, no kidding.
So
because it's a very bad thing to be bad, but it's a much worse thing to return to being bad after you've recognized that was insufficient. That's a much worse. That's that parable about the servant who doesn't know what he's doing, being whipped with few blows, or the servant who knows what he's doing, being condemned to hell fundamentally. Right. Because it's one thing to be bad unconsciously, and it's another thing to have learned and then return, to your.
And you just brought up what I think is a potentially strong, I don't know if I want to call it a conclusion to our conversation about the specifics of the show, but to an understanding of what I think makes the show work, which is that Jesus knows our hearts. He wants a relation. He wants a relationship with you specifically. So whether he's healing you, calling you to follow him, or rebuking you, it's not based on a paint by numbers, one size fits all. He knows what's in your heart. He knew what I needed to become the creator of The Chosen. It wasn't the same thing as someone else needed, right? He spoke to me directly, and my wife Amanda is here uniquely to make sure that I don't go back to who I was, the day before that moment. And so when Jesus calls us differently, the message of salvation is the same, but the calling is specific. And that's what you see in the show, is that when you see Jesus in the show, we've probably by season 5 have shown, I don't know, a dozen more miracles, or more than that, callings, rebukes, all of that. But each time it's specific to the heart of the person he's talking to. And we do that cinematographically too. We shrink the moment so that it feels personal. And what everyone says to me when they recognize me in public, 9 times out of 10, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, will say to me, thank you for the show, and they'll start to cry. And you experience this too. How many people, when they meet you, start to cry? Not because you're a celebrity, but because something's changed.
Yeah.
I've experienced that in my life. We'll talk about this off camera, but some of the people in our lives who you've changed just from something you've said or written. And so people will come up to me and they'll start to cry. But 9 times out of 10, when they say something about the show, it feels personal.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't feel like I'm walking in, and I love St. Peter's Basilica.
Great storyteller makes the archetypal personal. That's what a storyteller does.
And that's what I mean when I say I'm taking him down
Yeah.
from the stained glass window. So I visit St.
right.
Peter's Basilica in Italy, and it's one of the most, probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my
It's
life.
just beyond belief.
It's jaw-dropping.
It
Can
that's
be
for sure.
to the wrong person or in the wrong place. It can be distancing.
Mm-hmm.
It can make you go, is this the only way to reach God, is to create this level of beauty, and he's up there on the ceiling or he's in that painting and that structure? I can't access him. I have to be quiet as I walk through it.
Right.
I have to admire it. I don't have a relationship with it. And I certainly don't have a relationship personally with him. And so what my job is, and what I'm experiencing myself and what you see in the show is again what I talked about earlier, Jesus reaching for you. Mm-hmm. You might be reaching for him and think that you have to do this perfect thing. And that's oftentimes what happens in the Old Testament. It has to be perfect, perfect, perfect. Jesus comes in and says, you know what? It's never fully going to get there. It's never going to be perfect enough. So I'll do it for you. I will be that perfection. I will be that sacrifice. I will be the perfect sacrifice that Cain couldn't come up with. And so in doing that, it makes it personal and human. And so when Jesus is healing the woman who's been bleeding for 12 years, or he's healing the man who's been blind for so long, or he's saving Simon Peter from who is a believer, but who is focused on accomplishment and trying to catch as many fish as he can so that he can pay his taxes. And Jesus comes in and calls him to something greater, which is a fisher of men, not a fisher of fish. And all that is happening on a personal level, and it's causing people to respond emotionally.
I guess that's partly why it seemed to me that you handled the miracles so well. It's not that you downplay them; it's that it's a weird thing because you make them, in some ways, a matter of logical course. It's a weird thing to do with a miracle, but
it's the inevitable result of the need. It's
and the situation.
Yes.
And exactly.
Right.
It's that. Well, that's a strange thing to make the miracle appear to be, of course, the thing that would happen under those circumstances. Right.
So my belief is that, as we've seen you, Jordan Peterson, over the last several years, come to grips with the suffering you experienced, the physical suffering you experienced, that when you kind of disappeared for a year, and those of us who were fans are going, well, how's he doing? And you came back out of that and described it and talked about it, and your relationship with your wife and your daughter and all of the stories that we keep seeing on podcasts. And you talk about a dream that you've had. I mean, all the things that we've seen and people asking you questions. Do you believe Jesus actually walked out of the tomb? Right? All these, it's watching. I think people feel more connected to you than ever because they're seeing not only these brilliant lectures that you've given and these books that you've written, but now I'm seeing you cry because you're describing a dream that you've had. And that makes me go, oh, now I want to hear even more. And now some of the stuff that you're saying intellectually and broadly actually makes even more sense, and I'm even more connected to it. And I believe that's who God is. I don't have the intellectual capability to do even some of the things you're doing in your gospel series for Daily Wire. But I know that God created and Jesus rose. And those two things are enough for me. They're not everything, but it's enough for me to go, if I know that and I believe that, truly, then that makes everything else make sense. And now I can see some of these mysterious things through a foundation that's secure and solid, and that I still do believe, even if I don't understand this story, I do believe God created, and I do believe Jesus rose from the dead. And so my job as a storyteller and as a herald is to make that palatable to the masses as much as possible so that they're not resistant to or denied the opportunity to explore because of things like propaganda or church hurt or even their own religion. Sometimes our own religion can get in the way of a relationship, a personal relationship with Jesus. So I don't sit here writing going, how am I going to accomplish this? And I want to make sure that I'm sitting here just trying to tell a great story as much as well as I can and honor God and the text. But I think that's what's happening. That's when people meet me and they start to cry and they thank me. They're saying, I saw Jesus wink, or I saw Jesus look her in the eye, or I saw Jesus come down to his level as opposed to staying here. And it broke me because I realized it's for me too, just not only for that person. And so that's what The Chosen is doing for many people, is if you can see Jesus through the eyes of those who actually met him, perhaps you can be changed and impacted in the same way they were. Or, as is also in the case for many people who watch the show, they love the historical drama. It's a good show. They appreciate it. 30 to 40% of our audience is non-believers. We've been able to track that now. Right?
That's good.
And we're hearing from people who go, I don't believe he was the Son of God, but I love this show and I'm intrigued and I'm following along and I find myself wanting to be a better person, or I'm finding myself wanting to, whatever it is. And so perhaps they don't ever bend the knee to the Son of God that I believe he is, but I'm not trying to get you to do that when you watch the show. That's God's job. I'm gathering.